Greetings! It is I, Pathinder and Dracovin, your Lord Emperor. If you are joining me live on Twitch, hey, thank you for joining me. I hope you're enjoying. Make sure to say hi to YouTube in the comments. Yes, we're doing our usual Thursday Pathfinder videos, and if you're watching me on YouTube, we got an interesting one to talk about today. We're diving into an ancestry, which is slowly and surely evolving into their own group. It's one of the interesting things about them. Half-Elves. Now, you can say, like, oh, well, they're a combination of elves and humans, but the fact is, there are enough of them, and they're beginning to form their own communities. They are evolving into their own thing now. That half-elves are getting with half-elves and having half-elf children, and it is beginning to separate themselves off. And that is one of the interesting things about it, that we are getting a third, basically, ancestry that is, yes, considered half between the two of them, but societally and honestly, genetically evolving onto their own. Let's dive into it, but because I'm trying to remember to shout it out at the beginning now, have you played a half-elf before? Let me talk about it in the comments below. Or if you're live with us, in the description here, in the Twitch chat. Anyway, let's start where we always start with these videos, where I'm talking about an ancestry or a location or anything, and let's talk about the books that you might want to check out. Now, as I've always said, I use the Pathfinder Wikipedia combined with researching on a number of books to give you the basic information we're providing here. Effectively, I take these sources, the PDFs that I own, and combine that with the Wikipedia page to give you a report. So the books that you might want to check out are Bastards of Golarion, and, of course, the Inner-Sea World Guide. A lot of information on half-elves are provided from these locations. So let's start talking about half-elves, of course, because, hey, you know, that's why we're here. That's why we weren't here. That would be just a little bit strange. Guess, you know, we'd be here for something else, but nonetheless. Anyway. So, where do half-elves come from? Well, of course, the obvious relationships between humans and elves. And to a degree, this still happens. There are still times when humans and elves will get together and they will have children and they are half-elves. But they are now considered much more a true breeding race, a true breeding species, an ancestry that is beginning developing into their own thing. So they have effectively begun this transition into something different. And they still can get together with humans and elves, and they are in between, because both of those species are compatible, and hey, their in between is compatible with both of them. So they combine elven and human traits, and the problem though is they do tend to be considered outsiders by both sides. As much as they are a product of both of them, and they are becoming their own thing, when it comes to connections with humans and elves, they are different from either of them. The combination of the abilities and basically skills and adaptability of humans with the beauty and regality of elves oftentimes makes them good artists and entertainers, and many half-elves become adventurers. So, elven males are slightly a few inches taller than human males, while half-elven women are a good deal taller than your average human woman. They're, in fact, very close to half-elf males and half-elf females, are very close to size with each other. So it makes it less stark on the male side, but much more stark on the female side. Half-elves in general are about 5 to 6 inches shorter than elves. They have pointed ears, not nearly as pointed as elven elves. They have a lean build, comely appearance that elves happen to have, and their skin tends to be very fair, much like an elf's, but they take on coloration of whatever their human lineage is. So whether ethnicity, whatever region, the human that you are basically connected with, that's where your looks tend to come from. when it comes down to it, there are some half-elves that will look more human with their human ancestors, others that will look a little bit more elven, and the variation between this can lead to some social stigmas. Think about it this way. If you are a more human-looking half-elf, you're going to be more easily accepted in human society. If you're more elven-looking half-elf, you're more accepted in elven society. It's easier for them to integrate you. And so that difference can make a difference in how they are raised and the lives that they have. Unfortunately. So, where you come from makes a difference. Because most half-elves don't have one elven parent or one human parent nowadays in Golarion, but basically come from a pairing that generations in the past. So it could be that whether you are connected with more elves, humans, that kind of thing. If you're born from two half-elf parents, a half-elf with a human or elf, these variations are considered half-elven still. It kind of comes down to that direct human-elven parentage does happen, and it still happens. But a lot of these descendants from that lines, whether or not you're two half-elves together, or any other combination, are where you get it a little bit. Elven heritage plays a large role on what you are as a half-elf. So basically, most half-elves trace their ancestry back to one of the standard elven ethnicities. If you're from Kyonin, Maritime Forest, and Theresia, many of the other locations, those are the two main ones. Kyonin, Maritime Forest tend to be big ones because they are connected culturally and not maybe culturally, but geographically close to humans. There are half-elves of many other elven cultures that exist, though, and they have features and attributes connected with them. The half-elf cultures that you tend to see are the following. I'm going to give a list of them. The aquatic half-elves are the shoreborn, the half-drow, the darkborn, or thin-blood, connected to drow. They're the ones connected to half-elves. The Akuje half-elves, the wildborn, where Akuje elves are your half-born. Mordant Spire half-elves, where you come from Mordant Spire. And Snowcaster half-elves, which come from Snowcaster elves. What the image we've got here is a half-aquatic elf. So, yeah. So those tend to be some of the major groups that come there. Let's talk about half-elves and society and how they connect with that. And that's one of the iconic characters, the half-elven magus. You just know who he is there. Half-elves don't really fit in human society. They tend to fit in elven society. So basically, a half-elf, whatever their origin, tends to adapt to whatever society they feel most comfortable with. It's a versatility that's similar to human versatility, but it especially makes them incredible survivors. They tend to find themselves and try to make themselves indispensable to the society they connect with. They work to seek acceptance with those around them. These are very good traits that make them the adaptability, finding a place they feel like they can fit, and then making themselves indispensable and accepted. Within human societies, half-elves are also appreciated because they have a little bit of that elven beauty, heightened grace, and amongst elven societies, they are seen with the same traits as humans: spontaneity, freedom, excitement, and they try to live up to these as they are seen as the more positive aspects of each of these other societies in the societies they would be in. The dual ancestry can create conflict within them, with clashes between human and elven sides. sometimes they do have an elongated sense of elven time. They live longer than humans, not as long as elves, but that can find themselves opposition with human impulsivity. And, they do have a fragility, that can kind of, mentally, that can kind of lead to contact with the outward beauty. And some of them can suffer from madnesses and insanities because of these issues. So there isn't a standard half-elven childhood. They are born into families that tend to be loving and nurtured in communities that tend to teach them their values, whether human or elven. Many are like that. That is good. Others are born into environments that aren't as supportive or understand this mixed nature, and then these half-elven children have to fight for acceptance, recognition. Those that are in less accepted areas will seek self-reliance a lot more, and a lot of those will probably be more the half-elves, which tend to become adventurers, to search for their own meaning in life, to live apart from their birth community. So you can see that if you are a half-elf that is more accepted into a community, well, maybe become an adventurer, but maybe you just find life there. If you're a half-elf that is less accepted, well, leave. Find something out there. And, it's this difference between the two of them that we see a lot of adventurers, because there are plenty of times they're not accepted. Many half-elves in human societies have difficult adolescences. They're slower to mature than any siblings they might have, if they're humans to siblings or friends. This can lead to scars in their experiences, maybe problems with emotionally maturing. Similarly, if you're raised by an elven society, elf society is slow to do things because they have time, and they can become frustrated with this slow response that their parents can have or the society around them can have. And elves raise children over a century rather than a few decades. That's the thing is, elves have a way of doing things, I think we talked about it, that they physically mature in a couple of decades, but societally, it takes a century. Half-elves don't have that same kind of thing. They aren't the same as elves. They don't have that same amount of time. So there will plenty of half-elven children that aren't looked after properly that will leave the elven communities and find after existence. Again, it's sort of like, even if they're loving societies that are nurturing them, that are teaching them their values, that are accepting them, the fact that they're in between time. Humans are incredibly fast-paced, much faster than them. Elves are too slow. They're in the middle. Half-elves can live easily over 150 years. And so that means, when it comes to being with humans, they do tend to try to keep themselves emotionally distant a little bit. If they attach to their short-lived neighbors, well, their neighbors aren't going to live as long. So a half-elf could see 2 or 3 generations come and go by and not age a lot. Older half-elves will tend to become nostalgic, reminiscent people that they've lost. Half-elves adapt the customs, dress, mannerisms of adopted communities. Some prefer to stand out. Those that will blend in go to extremes to do so. So, most half-elves learn both Powding, the common language of most of the Inner Sea, and across a lot of Golarion, and Elven, regardless of where they grew up. And their names are drawn from Elven or human culture, depending on kind of where they're connected from. Many have ordinary names, because they want to blend in. Others carry Elven inflections. And there's no particular deity that they worship, too. Those that are more altruistic will tend towards Cade and Kalian, Desna, Sharene, Shelnan. Those with the more impartial viewpoint of the world, Callistrate, Orinethus. Those that go into darker emotions, Lamashtu and Zonkathon. And one more there with good Mr. Variant Jagere, who's half elf. So, Golarion as a world, unfortunately, one of the things I have to talk about is you have half-elves pretty much anywhere where elves and humans coexist. They're bound to happen. They don't really have a country, they don't have a really region that's their homeland, because they originate, even though they're developing on their own as their own group, connected to humans, connected to elves, connected to anywhere those two intermingle a large amount. There are a few settlements that do have half-elf majority. Most live in human communities, though. Places there are the town of Aragress and Keonian, which is basically separate place in the full-blood elf nation of Keonian where half-elves exist. I'll talk about that when I talk about Keonian in the future. But consider this also about Golarion. There's something that I don't talk about as much about Golarion. It is a world where, as much as there is a huge civilized portion, there is a large amount of Golarion which is still effectively unsettled. And it's one of those things is you can find half-elves anywhere there's humans and elves. And maybe I'll talk about that in the future a little bit more, about the emptiness of technically the unknown parts of Golarion. Much, and probably at very least 50 to 70% of the Golarion path is, maybe you got the coastline maps, but the exploration of those realms, who lives there, what's going on, largely unknown. Largely a question. Just assume if there's some elves or humans in the same spot, there's going to be some half-elves. But there you go. There's a little jaunt in half-elves. And yeah, certainly in Pathfinder First Edition, they were treated much more their own ancestry, and in Second Edition, they're kind of not in a way. They're much less treated as their own ancestry, and it's an unfortunate thing because they are sort of, in a way, but not. It's the thing is, they are but aren't. And I think that's the important part when we talk about half-elves. When we talk about them stat-wise, when you're playing one of them in game, they really aren't much different. They are a combination of two groups. They are representative of this combo. I'm going to really talk about them then when it comes to society in Golarion. Again, they don't really have a culture on their own. Their elven culture, or their human culture, or their wherever they've moved into. But they are their own thing. As I said, and as I've kind of pointed out here, there are still half-elves born to human and elf. It happens. But much, much more nowadays, if you are a half-elf on Golarion, either both of your parents were half-elves, or it was a half-elf and a human, a half-elf with an elf. The lineage, the traits, are pretty strong for the two sides. That it means they display themselves over many generations. And will there be a point in time where if a half-elf keeps getting with elves or humans, that eventually the other side would delude enough? That's hard to say. It hasn't really shown up yet. You just keep getting half-elves. Perhaps, if given a chance, they'll develop something of their own, but it's really hard to say. Because they are children of two other ancestries, they will be inevitably tied to those ancestries no matter what they do. You're going to be tied to them. You're between two worlds, and even trying to make something of yourself on your own, you can't cut those ties. You never can. they're never going to have a unique culture of their own that isn't in ways tied to a little bit of an elf and a little bit of a human. Maybe something new can develop. It's always going to be tied together, just as much as they will inevitably tie. The fact that when we look at them now, in Golarion, they are considered a true breeding ancestor, a true breeding species almost on their own. That's an important part about why talking about half-elves and understanding them a little bit more is important. Why it is strong to talk about them. Why we have to think about it. Anyway, I hope you enjoy diving into half-elves. As I said, when we talk about the side of things in the Pathfinder mechanics side, honestly, they are an excuse, along with half-orc, to talk about mixed species children. And yeah, half-elf, half-orc are the two big ones, and half-elf particularly is a pretty major one. As I've said, true breeding. That's an important part of that. That they are... It's almost as if, like, you know, you took dogs and wolves, and you can have compatible children, and whatever that was forms its own group in the middle. Or dogs and or wolves and coyotes, or something like that. And they are compatible. Well, I mean, it's less connected to that because technically they're wolves and dogs are derivative of each other, and elves and they're completely different things, but they're physically compatible because magic, fantasy, some connections and origins? Who knows? But they are. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today learning about half-elves and diving deep into this group, its ancestry. If you want to check out more of my stuff, I live stream this on Twitch, as I said earlier in the episode here. I hope you talk about your characters you might have. If you're following me on Twitch, hey, you can follow. That's what I mean. Here with me. But go check out the YouTube side. If you're joining me on YouTube, hey, maybe check this out on Twitch. We stream this every Tuesday, Thursday in the early afternoon, Saturday in the mornings. Thursdays tends to be my Pathfinder Golarion day. That if you want to check those stuff out, I don't do that stuff. If you're joining on YouTube, always remember, give a good like, subscribe if you already haven't, comment about your half-elf characters, and ring the bell to get more information about it. If you're looking for me in the world, I do have some social media accounts. I have a Discord link below and a Twitter.com. Either of those, I get basic information, brain parts, schedules, all that kind of stuff. Check me out. Anyway, I think that's all about for the shout-outs today. Hope you enjoyed. And hey, everybody, we'll talk more about various ancestries in the future, more about Golarion. I hope you join me for those. But until the next time you come around, we talk about things, or even something else we think about. I bid all of you out there a wonderful and wholesome farewell.